Welcome back, everybody, to our podcast. I hope all of you have been doing well since you last listened to our podcast. How have you been doing, Akash? How are you enjoying the Bitcoin price soaring high in the sky?
Yeah, man, it's great to look at those stats. But it does sort of bring up an interesting talking point about money, right? Cryptocurrency, money, stocks, and how to. I mean, if there's one thing, or there's several things that 2020 has taught us, is that your investment can go up or down today or tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
So one of the best resources that we have are obviously books, and one of the best books that was written after COVID, so it contextualized this entire not after COVID but during COVID, uh, that contextualized this entire crash and how we should think about money is called The Psychology of Money, which by Morgan Housel.
Yeah.
Wonderful book. Um, and I'm sure that, I mean, we've had conversations about it and you've read it as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a great book. But just before we begin to start, talking about it, let's just quickly talk about the author. Just we'll just give them a quick introduction. So Morgan Housel has been a financial writer for quite some time now. He's worked at Wall Street Journal, all the big names, and he's currently at something called as the Motley Fool, and also a collaborative fund where he gives financial advice. So one thing I like about his writing is that, I mean, which I read quite frequently, and I seriously urge everybody to do that. His writing is absolutely wonderful, and he puts out content very frequently. So just check it out. We'll link that to that as well. But one thing I really love about his writing is that the way he structures his writing. So I was listening to one of his podcasts. I don't know which podcast he was on, but he was describing his writing process. Like what are his goals when he's writing. So what he mentioned was that whenever he's writing, he keeps the question in mind as to whether his mom can understand whatever he's writing. So if he thinks that she can't understand that, then he simplifies it even further. It's not like his mother is a uneducated woman. She's quite smart, but she hates finance. So explaining to such a person about all the complexities of finance, it's very very simply. That's a great task, and he does it so beautifully, and that's what I enjoy about his writing. And another thing is that he never brings in politics to finance, which a lot of finance writers do out there. When you see the popular news media on finance, they I mean, it's both intertwined, but he has his way of not bringing in politics and just giving you that financial advice, or the content of it. So that's what I love about him. And we'll definitely link a few of his best articles on the collaborative fund in our description. So do check it out. Yeah. So that's about Morgan Housel. He's a financial writer. So this is his very first book that has come out. It's called The Psychology of Money, as Akash mentioned, and I really like the sort of, if you can say, the subtitle. It's Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed, and Happiness. Uh,
It
it's a
doesn't seem like a book about finance. It seems like a book
Yeah,
about life.
yeah, it's actually not a book about finance. You don't. I mean, the name might be, or even the image, where it's the image of a brain structured using the dollar notes. So it looks very financial. All big numbers in the book, but it honestly isn't. Akash is a finance guy, at least, but I am not a finance guy, and I found this book quite enjoyable. So do give it a read. But if you don't want to just listen to this episode, and I think that will do. We'll
Or what you can do is, if you don't want to give it a read or listen to this podcast, which we urge you to do both of them, but the book is derived from a blog that he has written and that
mm,
Morgan Housel has written in, I think, 2018. It's on the Collaborative Fund. We will link it in the show notes as well, so that you can sort of, it's a good synopsis of the entire book. It's about 20 lessons that will take you through uh, your money problems, or at least help you to think about money better. And
mm,
the good thing is very easy to find, because the blog is called The Psychology of Money.
mm,
So it's pretty straightforward, and it does make for a very good read and a very good sort of short form of the book. But regardless, we would urge you to read the book as well, because there's a lot of things that are in the book in terms of examples, real life scenarios, uh, and that you can take from the book and even apply to your own way of thinking. And the other good thing about this book is, if you read most books about finance or investment or the economy, as I've mentioned, that it's very derived towards a political sort of philosophy against or for someone, or a
mm,
type of regulation or type of policy. But with most finance books, they're very actionable in terms of the insights that they give you, right? They tell you, this is the kind of fund you should invest in, this is how you need to look at stocks, this is how you need to look at equity and debt, this is how you need to divide it into your portfolio, this is how you should approach personal finance in terms of savings, investments, and expenses, and all sorts of things. And when you
yeah.
sort of dive deep into those things, you, the author, not the writer, will get lost in his or her expertise. And because of that, they'll use words like valuations and PE multiples and PBV multiples and stuff like that, that the average reader, it'll just go over their head.
Mm,
And this book is completely free from all of that. And it's written in short, crisp, very go to sentences. It opens with a very realistic example, both the blog and the book, that we can all uh, find ourselves in. And it takes you through a good journey, because I mean, we've all heard this saying, right? Like, fix your relationship with money, or define your relationship with money, or just something with your relationship with money, right?
mm,
But how do we exactly think about money is is the first step. And then we can go on to things like, okay, I need to save, I need to invest. Why do I need to save? Why do I need to invest? What do I need to save in? What do I need to invest in? Stuff like that. So that's, I think, step 2 or 3. But
mm,
the first one is very clearly, how should one think about money? And
mm,
that's why this book can be read by anyone who, if you're someone who's very in depth into finance, you can read it and understand it. If you're someone who's just approaching the topic and just got your first paycheck, and you just like, I don't know what to do with it, rather than spend it, just read this book and sort of contextualize and think about, how can this help me, not tomorrow, but 30 years from now, 40 years from now, which
mm.
is what this book is about and will help you with,
Yeah.
right?
So I think we've made enough and a great case for reading this book. So why don't we actually, now delve into it and talk about it? So let's start with, I think there are 15, even in the blog, there are, I think, 15, 16 principles that he has mentioned, and in the book, he explains it deeper than in the blog. He gives more examples, and that's another great thing about this book. He gives a lot of examples which are very, very interesting. At least I found them quite interesting. So yeah, he does that. So I don't have the blog open, Akash. If you have it, why don't we start off with the first topic?
Right. Yeah, I do have the blog open, and as I mentioned, we will link this. So if you're
Yeah.
listening to this, and if you have your phone or a computer open and you're not commuting while listening to this, it would be really nice if you could also read about the blog, because what we say is from our perspective, and when you read it, it's from your perspective, and that will give you a better idea of this. So
Hmm.
um, The first point that he mentioned, and he opens this uh, by saying that this report describes 20 flaws, biases, and causes of bad behavior I've seen pop up often when people deal with money. So it's not just the good, but it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Um, so the first point is earned success and deserved failure fallacy, a tendency to underestimate the role of luck and risk, and a failure to recognize that luck and risk are different sides of the same coin.
Hmm. So yeah,
So
the
what immediately strikes you when you hear that?
So what I realized was so this book, especially in this chapter or in this point, it opened my eye to the role of luck and risk in any individual's success or failure, for that matter. So I have been reading biographies of these great people, not just inventors or CEOs of or such, but even politicians or folks from the past. So when you read their individuals, and obviously there is a biography of, if there is a biography of that person, it means that they have been successful in the thing that they have done. So we read about that. And what at least I was doing till I read this book was, trying to derive it, like trying to understand how their success was, what was the steps towards it, and see if I could apply it in my own life. But what he mentions in this book, in his book, and in this blog, is that the success that we see of the people, it's almost all the time attributed to, not everything obviously, but the majority of their success can be attributed to luck, and luck is something that we really can't control. And following, and hence trying to follow these people, or following their exact footsteps, would be rather a foolish thing to do, right? Because and he gives this great example of Bill Gates,
Right.
whom a lot of people adore in this world and would want to be like him. So he talks about how Bill Gates got started in computer, in he got interested in computer. So the high school that he went to, it it was the only high school in, I think, I don't know the exact number, so please don't hold me to it. I think 300 out of 300 schools in that area or in that region of the United States, only 300 schools had a computer when Bill Gates was in school. So that's how he got hooked onto it, and that's how he, his career, sort of his interest built up and his career started. And that shows, that element of luck. I mean, obviously Bill Gates might not think about it, or we would have not thought about it, but that is a huge role. If Bill Gates had never had that computer in his school, I mean, we can't say for sure that Microsoft would ever have existed, right? So that's what he means by luck playing a role, and even judging people uh, based on their luck. Sorry, he talks about not judging people based on their outward success, because there is a lot of factors behind it which we don't quite understand. So judging and admiring them just off their whatever appears in the outside is never a good idea.
Right. Yeah. The same thing goes with finance, right? Like you can't judge someone based on um, their the goods that they have, or the cars that they own, or the watches that they wear, right? And the
Mm,
best thing with financial assets like equity or debt, or anything that can't be worn or shown, right, is that right now it's electronic, and it's in a bank account, or it's somewhere sort of locked up, and it's not a status symbol basically. Like
mm,
you can't wear a chain that says I bought Tesla at X, or I bought Infosys at X, right? You can't wear that, but you can definitely
yeah.
wear a gold chain, or you can show that I have real estate or stuff like that.
Mm,
So it, it 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 shows that the effect that investments are not status driven,
mm,
they're growth driven, and they're based on um, showing less of what you actually own and showing more and not showing anything at all, right?
mm,
And in that, luck plays an enormous role, because if you're not buying anything to show it off,
Hmm.
then you don't really need to put it out there at all,
Hmm.
right?
And so, and again, one other thing which we are doing currently is most people, we only talk about luck. And what he says is that luck and its cousin, risk, they are, doppelgangers. And where there is luck, there is also the opposite of it. There is risk. So you never know what's going to work for you. Sometimes it can be luck working for you, or sometimes it's risk working against you. And that's the factor that we all have to take in when we are looking at success of people or companies or whatever. And to summarize this whole point or this whole chapter in the book, he mentions two great points, and I really want to bring that up. First, he says that uh, be careful who you praise and admire, be careful who you look down upon and wish to avoid becoming. And he there is a small blurb where he small blurb from a letter that he has written to his newborn son. And I want to read that because it's beautiful and very, very timely as well. So it starts, quotes, some people are born into families that encourage education, others are against it. Some are born into flourishing economies, encouraging of entrepreneurship. Others are born into war and destitution. I want you to be successful and I want you to earn it. But realize that not all success is due to hard work and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when judging people, including yourself. So it's such a timely advice that he gives to his newborn son and to all of us when we are looking at other people. And he caps it off by saying, therefore, focus less on specific individuals and case studies and more on the broad patterns. So I think that's how even we should look, and even you should look at successes and of people who have done well in investing or any other thing. Avoid looking at specific cases and look at the larger patterns. And
Larger picture, yeah.
yeah, so I think that would summarize the first one, right?
Right. So
Yeah.
moving on to point number two. Point number two states that cost avoidance syndrome, a failure to identify the true cost of a situation with too much emphasis on financial costs while ignoring the emotional price that must be paid to win a reward. And I think, I mean, the best investment that you can have is not worrying about your investment when you go to bed, right? If
Hmm.
you are worrying about your portfolio, your expenses, or money problems, all of these things as your head hits the pillow, then you know you've either made a, a bad decision or you're in a problem, right?
Hmm.
And that is something that we really need to identify. And the way you can approach this is, and the way the example that he gives is, if you want to buy a car, if it costs say $30,000, you have a few options. You could either pay for it, buy something less than $30,000, lease or rent a car, or steal it.
Hmm.
One of those three options will have a significant emotional cost than the other two. And it's obviously the third one. You don't want to engage in grand theft auto, right?
No, but the point
um,
that I think he's saying is that 99% of the people avoid that third option, which is to steal it. But when it comes to finance or stock market, that is what most people do, right?
yeah, they go for the easy win, the
Mm.
get rich quick scheme, the I can put $10 in it today or 100 rupees in this today and I can get like 300 tomorrow.
Hmm.
If that's not possible in everyday life, it can't be possible in the stock market as well. If it's not
Hmm.
possible with something as simple as a transaction, like buying a car, it's definitely not possible in the stock market, which is just an amalgamation of all these things that we have,
Hmm.
right? So the obvious thing is that you need to understand, and he sort of explains this really well, is we need to understand the cost of investing or anything to do with money. There's obviously a cost to it.
Hmm.
And it's very rare that you'll ever be financially free, or there's anything that does not have a cost associated to it, not just the opportunity cost, but the transaction cost and actually engaging with something,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. So that's the thing. When people think, when you're investing for the long term, or when you're compounding, there is no entry fee, like there is no introduction fee. But there is an introduction fee, but it's the thing is, it's just not, you're not paying it in money. Yeah. So, and that's a great point that he brings out in the book as well, when he's talking about this. Think about fine and fees. So fine is something like, traffic fine. When you violated a traffic rule, you get fined. It's more like a punishment. But fee is it's not exactly the opposite of it, but it's also not a punishment. So fee is, think about it, paying, I don't know how much the Wonderla price is, but he talks about Disney World, where the entry fee is $1,000. Sorry, $100. $1,000. That's too much. So you pay $100 to go in. So it's a fee that you're paying to Disney, but the returns that you're getting at the end of the day out of it is, a day filled with amazing rides, amusement, and quality time with your friends or family. So you don't
Yeah.
necessarily
So
see it as a punishment. So that entry fee, like people often see, the volatility of the market, or the uncertainty that's there, or the doubt, like, is the market going to crash, or if it's that, all that uncertainty and volatility, people see that as a fine rather than a fee. And he urges people to look at it as a fee, because if you look at it as a fee, you're paying all those, the mental efforts that go through volatility, for something amusing later on, which is the returns that you're going to get on for the efforts of your of your compounding assets, right?
right, yeah, we can look at this in terms of input and output, which is very simple, right? If you feel like you're putting in lower input than you're getting output, then you've found value in anything that you do.
Hmm.
And if it's the opposite in terms of, if you feel like you're getting less output than the input you put in, then it's a cost that you pay, right? The cost is more than the value that you receive.
Hmm.
So we need to think of investment as foregoing a short-term cost
Hmm.
for a long-term benefit, right?
Hmm.
And the opposite is true of of the fine concept that he mentions, um, where we forego a long we receive a short-term cost or a short-term benefit for a long-term cost.
Hmm.
That could be not choosing to invest or save, or thinking about money in an incorrect way, where it is a medium for me to sort of tap into my lavish needs, right?
Hmm.
And that's something that we should generally try to avoid.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
True.
moving on to point three, rich man in the car paradox, right? So I mean, we've all, it can be rich man in the car, a person with something that we want, and we always look at them as, that is the standard that I want to achieve,
Hmm.
right? That is, oh, that the guy with the car is so cool, or the guy with the watch or the phone or the PlayStation 5 is so cool. And we don't look at this in terms of, how does it act, what do you actually do to get there? It's just that I want to get there,
Hmm.
right? We look at the end and not the means.
Hmm.
um, and 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 that is the way he says it, is that point, we shouldn't really look at wealth, we shouldn't really abandon the pursuit of wealth, because I mean, everybody wants nice things, right? But we need to respect the fact that it takes a lot of time, effort, and energy to get there. And the most important thing is, it takes a long time to get there, and we can't really understand the exact way in which to get there, in terms of that the person who has the nice car might have a lot of policies. It might be on rent, sorry, it might be leased. He
Yeah.
probably is in significant amount of debt,
Hmm.
and the car is the last nice thing he has, right? And probably worked really hard to get there, who knows,
Yeah,
right?
but no,
So it's
but I think the paradox about like the paradox that he's talking about is the one that we often have observed it ourselves, especially if you're a guy, because every time you see a sports car, or a very luxurious car in the traffic, or the traffic signal, you look at them. But the paradox that he's saying is that you look at the car, you don't look at the person inside, and the person inside is always trying to flaunt his wealth. But the paradox is and the weird thing is that the outside admirers, they're not admiring him. They don't. How many times do you even remember the person's face? All you look at is the car and how like how the kind of respect and admiration that he's getting, and we want to be in that position, right? That's what we when we look at these cars out on the street, we don't want to be that, like we want to be that guy in terms of the respect or admiration that we get, right? So that's the paradox that he's talking about. We barely remember his face or his name or how he even looks. We remember the car that he was in, right? So that's the paradox I think he's essentially talking about here. And
So just add on from the letter that you've mentioned, the one that where he writes to his son. He sort of continues the same letter in the paragraph in the chapter on the rich man in the car,
Mhm.
where he says, what you want is respect and admiration from other people, and you
Mm.
think having expensive stuff will bring it. It almost never does, especially from the people you want to respect and admire you.
Mhm. So to wrap up this point, if respect and admiration are your goals, you
Don't
just
buy a
have to
car.
be, yeah, just be careful how you seek it. Kindness or empathy or even humility bring you more respect than horsepower ever will. That's the line in the sentence which I loved.
That's a good way to put it, man.
Yeah. So yeah, that's, I think it's a great point as well. How you look at success. So what is the next one?
Point number 4 is a tendency to adjust to current circumstances in a way that makes forecasting your future desires and actions difficult, resulting in the ability to capture long term compounding rewards that come from current decisions. Now, that is a mouthful. uh, so, yeah, so I mean, I can ask you this: what immediately comes to your mind when you think of long term compounding?
Like after reading after reading this book, definitely Warren Buffett or his investing partner Charlie Munger comes into my mind when you talk about long-term investing. But I think the point that he makes is that's not what it comes in. As a kid, you want to be something like a tractor driver or a race car driver. Or a taxi driver, because it seems like you're driving
It's
the
cool, it's
car,
fun.
yeah, around town. It's fun. But what he emphasizes in this chapter, in this point especially, is that you know your goal, like your life goal, changes constantly. Like when you're a 5-year old, you want to be a tractor driver. When you're 10 years old, you want to be like, when you're 18, you want to be a lawyer. But then you take up law school, or you take up a course on law, and you realize it's too much effort for nothing, and then you change. So essentially, humans, like, we are all humans, and that's the core point of this book, which I think we forgot to mention. He talks about finance. He makes this book is a case for his argument that finance is a soft skill, and it's not a hard skill that has to be learned in schools or universities. It's a soft skill that every person has, because uh, the everybody interacts with money in everyday life. Yeah. So, and behaviors change, and behaviors are different from different people. Like, your experience might be different from my experience, and how
Yeah,
I.
and humans are basically not rational beings, right?
Yeah,
And I
definitely not.
hate this line that people say, if you would have invested in X 10 years ago,
Mm,
you would have 10x your return. I mean, that is the basic fallacy of that is, a, nobody would have invested in whatever you think about, whether it's Bitcoin or a
exactly.
stock or whatever. uh, Nobody would know that that was the right time. A, nobody would have sustained that sort of investment over that period. B, and people would, if they would have been that lucky, they would have pulled out at some time and not waited till now for you to tell them that, oh, if you would have done this, you would have got that, right?
Hmm,
So I mean, we can't factor in all those things, all those if, buts, and whens, right? We
hmm,
have to sort of rely on sustainable systems that work over a period of time,
hmm,
right? And the easiest example of that in what he gives is in investing. And sort of he says this about Warren Buffett. He says Warren Buffett's skill is investing, but his secret is time.
Hmm.
That's how compounding works,
Hmm.
right? If you just stick with something for a very long time, no matter if it's a skill, or if it's with money, or if it's with anything that is sustainable over a long period of time and that will survive if your circumstances change, it's something that can grow significantly.
Yeah, so that's the thing. You know, your life goals keep changing. God knows how many times I've changed mine, and it happens with everybody. You know, at a certain age, you want to be something else. But he actually admits that there is no solution to this. When you're changing, you're obviously losing money. For like, let's say you wanted to be an engineer at one point into your life, and you go to college, take out a loan and go to college, and then when you graduate you want to be a dancer. Yeah, and now we have that debt to pay off, and that debt, until you pay off that debt, you can't
Do what you
take up
love.
take up
Yeah.
dancing. Yeah, so basically what he says, there is no solution to this, but one thing I've learned that may help is coming back to balance and room for error. So basically having a room for error in your investment plan, or your savings, where even if things change, like what you mentioned, even if things change in the future, or even if the markets change, there is always, you're always fine. You're not struggling. So I think the core principles that keep repeating in this book, there are a few, but the ones that come to my mind right now are, one, the power of compounding. I think we'll talk about it. And two, is this always having that margin of safety, that room for error in your investment. I think he keeps coming back to that in every single chapter, and that shows how important that is. Yeah.
Right. So just by mentioning room for error and margin for safety, um, we've ticked off
Yeah.
a few points
Yeah,
that we
few
wanted
points.
to talk
Yeah, yeah,
about, just so that we don't want to drag this
yeah,
on over and over again. Not that he has in the book; it's a wonderful read,
yeah.
um, but there are these core principles that we have to get across. And another one is this concept of freedom, right?
Hmm.
Um,
That was my favorite part.
what did you like so much about it?
No, I really liked. I think so. This book, I think it's a primer for anybody who wants to get started in investing, or who wants to get started in finance, and it's also a primer for every young person who's getting a paycheck. It's a book for every young person who's getting a paycheck, and it's because, and especially this chapter, I think I've always known this, but he gave out those examples that just brought home the point. So he talked about freedom. That's the thing that we all want, the freedom, freedom from our work, like doing tough tasks and just spending time the way we want, how we want, and with the people that we want. So that is basically freedom, and that's what everybody wants at the end of the day, right? And if you I think I have written down a few points that I wanted to mention when I'm talking about this freedom chapter. I'm just uh, browsing through it. So, yeah, the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, it's priceless. And this is one of the best lines in the book, that he says, no, it is the highest dividend money pays. At the end of the day, what are you earning money for? Right? You're earning for that freedom. And he mentions this one study that, towards the end of this chapter, this one person, one researcher, he talked to about 1,000 elderly Americans, uh, asking about their decades of life experience. And what he found out was that no one, not a single person out of 1,000, said that to be happy you should try to work as hard as you can to make money to buy the things that you want. Yeah. So no one, not a single person, said you should choose your work based on your desired future earning power. What they did value were things like quality, friendship, being part of something bigger than themselves, and spending
Yeah,
quality.
something that cannot be quantified and put into money
Yes,
or
exactly.
monetary terms,
Yes. And another
right?
beautiful line was that your kids don't want your money, or what your money buys, anywhere near as much as they want you. Specifically, they want you with them. So every time you're laboring yourself out, for more money, that greed for more money, you got to spend more time. You are basically giving away all these valuable things that you could have had, and I think it will only lead to regret later in your life, that all the time that you could have spent, with your friends, with your family, that's a regret. So he says that you need to, uh, controlling your time is the highest dividend money can pay. So you need to make sure all your plans, your investment, it's it's leading towards that goal of freedom.
Right, and he doesn't sort of go by the sort of the route where, oh, money isn't required, freedom is the thing that's important, so quit your job and go be free, right? He sort of very clear, like in the in our talk about ambition earlier in the podcast, where he says that everybody wants a nice car or those possessions, but we should really pay attention to the larger picture, right?
Hmm.
Similarly with money, we should really pay attention to the larger picture of not what we are, what is the goal of the money that we're uh, yeah,
Hmm.
receiving
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now, right? The goal isn't to I need to make x amount of money to buy x amount of things. It's I need to make x, I would like to make x amount of money so that I can rid myself of these problems, whether
Hmm.
these problems are debt or some sort of funding, or I need to improve my life in this way or that way. And money is the way to do that. It is, people say it's not money can't buy happiness, but it'll sure get you very, very close.
Yeah. And one more, like, to wrap this thing up, I want to talk about this. I think this was another aha moment for me, where he talks about Rockefeller. He what's the first
Oh,
name?
that poem,
John D.
wow, that
No, no,
is.
no, not the poem specifically. Yeah, John D. Rockefeller. He was one of the greatest American businessmen, quite some a while ago. So Rockefeller. So he talks about that. So during that time, I think it was what, the 1900s, early 1900s, 1920s. Uh, the majority of the jobs that there were all physical, and they were all time based. For example, you were an assembly line worker or a coal mine worker, and you can't sort of bring that job home, right? You are
Right.
right there, you mine or you assemble things, and you come back home and you leave your tools, your work at work, and then you come back home, you spend time with family. But Rockefeller was one of these people, and Rockefeller, he built trains and train tracks and all those things that revolutionized the American industrial society. uh, but Rockefeller's job, he never laid down the tracks himself. He never went out and mined the coal himself. His job was to think. Yeah, he would always think about the decisions, and he was a thinker. So his job was always on the clock, like 24 into 7. Unlike his workers, who had probably like a 9 to 5 kind of a thing. But what Morgan Housel brings out with this point is that that's how the jobs were back then. But if you think about the jobs that are right now, all the jobs, you take your job back home, your jobs back home. Yeah. So think about it. The jobs right now all are, either in a manager position or a professional position, where you're more like Rockefeller than his employees, where you are tasked with making, although micro decisions, you're tasked with making decisions for your people. And even if you're, even if take an entry level graduate, after 1 or 2 years, even they become a project lead or whatever, they are tasked in that decision making process. So once you are in that decision making process, even though your work can be 9 to 5, weekdays, weekends off, and everything, when you come back home, you're still thinking about your work. You're still thinking about the decisions that you're going to make. If, for example, if you're in the tasked with the marketing campaign, you're still thinking about how you can influence it when you're cooking, when you're with your kids. So you're still on the clock. So, and since controlling your time is such a key to happiness, we shouldn't be surprised that people don't feel much happier, even though we are on average richer, because all these current jobs, being a manager or professional, it's paying you more, but it's also uh,
Taking
it's
so
mentally
much of your
tasked.
time.
Yeah, that's the thing, it's taking so much of your time. And that was a brilliant uh, revelation for me. Like, I had never thought about that, though, if you compare it to the past to the present, almost all of them we bring our work back. And that's the reason we don't feel that happy even when we are at home. We're still thinking about what to do with work. So yeah, and that is the kind of freedom that you need to sorry, that is the kind of things you need to try and find yourself away from. And having making wiser and more astute investment planning will help you achieve that freedom, is what he makes is the point that he makes in this particular chapter.
So another point that you mentioned, that you can't you these days you can obviously take your work back home. You can be reached through the internet and through your smartphone wherever
Mm,
you are, and you can be put to task wherever you are. Right. In the same way, you can take your money problems home as well,
mm,
because we're constantly thinking about money, and we're constantly thinking about what's happening with all these things that sort of will affect our money, whether it's savings, investment, the economy, and all of these things. And an important point that he brings out is, if you have control over your money, and if you
mm,
have at least a disciplined way to use it, whatever that way might be, uh, you don't have to let it riddle you and let it constantly be sort of like a black cloud over your head. And when you're eating, sleeping, taking a shower, it's like, what's happening with my money, right?
mm,
And that's an important point, that freedom, it's not freedom from money, it's freedom with money,
mm,
but in a way that actually gives you freedom.
mm. And also like to bring up Naval Ravikant in this thing, because he also essentially talks about this in all the podcasts. You need to able to start thinking about freedom, and the only way you can get that freedom, or be rich and get that freedom, is when you own a piece of business like stocks, or when you're investing in something where your money is making you
Yeah,
money.
essentially he talks
Yeah,
about equity, right?
yeah, exactly.
What's that quote? You're not making money until you're making money when you're not working,
Yeah, when you're
right?
sleeping.
So,
Yeah,
or when you're
something like that.
sleeping, or when
Yeah,
you're just going for a walk, or when you're not working,
yeah,
basically, right?
mm,
And that's the way you can do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be investing in this way or that way. It's just having ownership of what you do, and a piece of business, like you correctly pointed out, will allow you to grow,
mm,
and it'll allow you to grow when you're not doing anything. And that
mm,
is another concept that he talks about, both in the book as well as Naval Ravikant talks about this as well. It's the concept of leverage.
mm. Yeah. Give me a lever long enough, and I will and I will move the world. It's a quote by Archimedes, which is very powerful. So you need that leverage, where you're not necessarily giving your time for money. You're just a few moments of your time, like your decisions, or where your money is just making more money for you. Like real estate is making money for you. Your investment, like your stocks or your
Great, man. Whatever
Bitcoin
works for
investment.
you.
Yeah. So, I think what we have talked about all the principles that are already, it's all intertwined. So we have instead of going, point by point, I think we have just mixed it up and talked about everything. But I think we haven't still talked about the power of compounding. I think we can just focus on that, and with that, I think we can just bring out others quickly, and because everything is intertwined. When you read that book, you will notice that. Uh, so let's talk about the power of compounding. So, and why why everybody should think about this. And the way in this book, the author Morgan Housel introduces the chapter of compounding is by this line. It says, quotes, $81.5 billion of Warren Buffett's $84.5 billion net worth came after his 65th birthday. Our minds are not built to handle such absurdities. So this just blew me away. Like that man's net worth is $84.5 billion, and 81 $1.5 billion came
That's
after his 65th.
96%, by the way.
96% of his net worth came after his 65th birthday. That, if that doesn't drive home the point of compounding, then I don't think anything can. So he started investing at the age of 10. And I remember I once attended a webinar by Morgan Housel, I think in September. It was organized by Paytm or something in prior to launch of this book. So he talks about that there as well. What he says that I think he mentions that again in the book. Warren Buffett started investing at the age of 10, and it kept compounding. So that's why it reached to that level where he is right now. But he also runs this thought experiment. If he started investing at the age of 30 and finished up retired by the age of 65, he would have, I think, again, don't hold me with the numbers. I think he would have around just 30 million as his net worth, 30 million, or even lesser than that. So just 30 years of compounding would just have 30 million or less than that as his net worth. So that shows the power of compounding. Small things add up. Don't think about investing big and expecting big returns. Small things lead to bigger. Small things with time lead to bigger things,
Yeah,
right?
so when you zoom out of all this noise, right? Whether it's economic cycles or strategies gone wrong or right, or bull runs and bear runs, right? Or springs and crashes, or whatever you want to call it. If you zoom out of all of this, and if you just look at what is the most important skill or element or something that has to work to your advantage in order for you to compound in the right way,
Hmm.
it's just time.
Hmm.
It's just time. And sort of he states this really well in the chapter where he says there are books on economic cycles, trading strategies, and sector bets, but the most powerful and important book should be called Shut Up and Wait. It's just one page with a long-term chart of economic growth. That's it.
That's so true. I would read that book. Shut up and wait. I'm pretty sure there would be nothing in that. But yeah, that should be the motto of everybody who's starting investing at a young age. Just shut up and wait. Let compounding do its wonders.
Yeah,
On my
getting wealthy versus staying wealthy, right? So
Yeah.
what he talks about is that that there are different ways where you can get wealthy, but there's only one way where you can actually stay wealthy, where you just have to be disciplined, sustainable over a long period of time. What compounding will allow you to do is just stay on that track, but getting the money and keeping it are two very different things, right?
Hmm.
And it only works if you give it years to grow.
Hmm. Yeah. So there is another thing that uh, he differentiates. Being rich and sorry, being rich and being wealthy is completely different things, and that is what he brings up as a counter argument to the people who say, Warren Buffett, although he's very filthy rich, he's getting that all that net worth when he's 65, right? So what he says is that being rich is just you buying stuff and like a car, a house, where people see that you are rich. But staying wealthy is you not spending too much, just staying just buying things that are essential to you, and then letting the whatever the difference between the income and your expense, letting and putting and saving that. Yeah. And I think he talks about he refers to that with an example of the diet, uh, where he talks about nutrition, where people uh, who want to who want to lose fat. Then we all know how hard it is to lose fat, right? It's excruciatingly painful to lose fat, but it's worth it. So people go off and do like let's say a 50-minute Zumba session where they think they burnt where they think they burned like 500, 600 calories. Probably they
He's
did.
speaking from experience, by the way.
where they might have burned that many calories, but sometimes it's less. And immediately after that, what people think is that uh, now that I've done that 15-minute session and burned so many calories, I can go and eat
Let
the
loose,
meal,
eat whatever I want.
eat the
Yeah.
meal. But what we always forget, what we always underestimate, is the amount of calories we have burnt, and overestimate the amount of calories that we are eating after that workout. So that is the same thing about being rich and staying wealthy. So the wealthy people, what they do, they focus on the net calories burned. So they do go out and eat, but they eat less than the amount that they have burned. So that's how you increase your net calories burnt, and that's how you lose weight. But people who want to be rich, they go out, they make big, they have a big payout, and they make money, but they overestimate. They underestimate that money that they've made, and go out and spend a lot of it on cars. So I'm not saying don't buy cars. I mean, I definitely, when I make such money, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go buy a Lamborghini or something like that. But you need to be able to think, or again, going back to that margin of safety, you need to think about that margin of safety, or that room for error in whatever your investments, your savings, your spendings. There should always exist such a thing.
Yeah, that is pretty much a very good summary of the entire, or at least our take on it, as unstructured and as rambly as it was, hence
Yeah.
the name.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, if so, just to wrap up, in one sentence, what is something that you uh, got from this book that was immediately like you were awestruck?
uh, you said one thing, but I'm going to say two things. One
Oh,
is
okay.
one is definitely the freedom part. Aim for freedom. Don't aim for big payouts. I mean, definitely that's going to lead to freedom, but you need to be able to strategize that. That was the first one. Aim for freedom. And second one, I think, which we didn't talk about quite enough, but that's because we saved the best for you to read and find out. It's the tails part. About how most investors, especially venture capital folks, venture capitalists, what they do is they invest in 50 to 100 companies, 100 startups, and almost always just two or three companies make up for all the investments that they've done over these 100 companies. So the point is, when you invest in a wide range, it's almost certain that a very like only a few products or few things, few funds makes back that money that you have invested. So that was another revelation for me. Like, tails, it's important, thinking about the tail end of all these things. And in the book, he's given a lot of examples for that. How Amazon, even Apple and Amazon, Amazon's launched a Fire phone or something, which was a colossal failure, right? And the things that they did not expect, like AWS, Amazon Web Services, is the one making most of their income. So that's the thing. It's always, there is that luck, there is that risk. It's all a mix of things. All you have to do, I think, my biggest takeaway was that shut up and wait, and keep investing regardless of the market. You be consistent in your efforts, uh, and reap the rewards after compounding does its magic. What about you?
Right, so my biggest takeaway was very simple and not as unglamorous as we made it out to be. Is it's 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 difficult to do what everyone isn't doing, and that's because opportunity lives where others aren't, and others mostly tend to stay away from what's boring. But
Hmm.
boring is fine, and he says this very 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 nicely: boring is perfectly fine, boring is good. Just frame this, right? So in addition to the tiny little book that Arvind says, that shut up and wait, and just get something like this framed on your wall, saying that boring is perfectly fine, boring is good, boring is doing what other people aren't.
Yeah. So I think that's a great way. And I think we can end this whole thing by a quote from Napoleon saying, a genius is the man who can do the average thing when everyone else around him is losing his mind." So I think that caps off the entire the book, this podcast, this episode, everything. You know, do the average thing when everybody's losing their minds around you. So I think that's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we honestly urge you to pick up this book and read it. We obviously don't have any affiliate or anything. I'm pretty sure he doesn't even know
We
us.
should.
So yeah, we should, but it's still early stages. Let's hope for that one day. But yeah, definitely pick that up, even if you're not into finance or and investing. Think about this as a great starting place and a great way to begin your journey. Anything else, Akash? Do you have to add?
Nothing. That's it from me. We will link everything that we spoke
Yes.
about, including the blog, which is a wonderful sort of precursor for the book and should be read regardless. And yep, that's it from us. We're out.